Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to Music is Not a Genre, the interview edition. Thank you so much for watching or listening wherever you are. I appreciate all of that support in whatever form. If you'd like to take it a step further, please visit me at patreon.com/musicisnotagenre. I would love to have you there. You get not only these interviews, but a whole bunch of other things that only that family gets. Or you can go to anchor.fm/musicisnotagenre. If you're more of an audio person, there are ways to sign up there. You can listen for free, but any donation, of course, would help support the podcast and everything I do. And as always, you can see me, the podcasts, and a bunch of live music and music videos and such on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Nick DiMatteo. With me today is David Dabbon. He is a composer, songwriter, arranger, and orchestrator. He was the dance music arranger for Beetlejuice on Broadway and an Emmy nominee for Outstanding Music and Lyrics for Eat Shit Bob on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. David, how are you today?
I'm good, Nick. It's good to be here with you. How are you?
I am very good, thank you. Yes, I've been looking forward to this for a while. Those of you out there in TV land, we saw each other at a wedding recently, and we've chatted before then, but it's kind of leading up to this moment here where the two of us can have just kind of a one-on-one. Yeah.
I love your avocado, your pillow in the background.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's one of a pair. One is this one I think is me, and the other one is Catherine. So, you know.
Perfect.
Yes. So I always start with this just for fun, but can you tell everyone how we know each other?
Sure. So we met through your other half, Catherine. And I met Catherine through a friend of ours, Meg. And I guess Meg and Kat were performing together at Summerstock, and funny enough, I was at that Summerstock the year before. It was in New Hampshire, and the year that Meg and Kat were together, I was at a Summerstock that was a couple hours away, and our theater had a wig, and Kat and Meg drove all the way to pick up this wig because they had like a really terrible wig at the theater and they needed a blonde wig, and they get to our theater and the costume designer was like, here's the wig, and she pulled out like one from like, you know, one of those party supply stores. It was like such a ratty, like, you know, Halloween wig, and Kat and were like, oh no, we drove all this way just for this not good wig. But I was in truth, I was like, to get to see each other, and that was my first time meeting Kat, and yeah, we've been friends ever since.
That's incredible. So this chance need of a wig, and that the fact that you were all there in an area that you were just there for the summer, and now it's like 15 or so years later. Yeah.
And it brought us together.
Yes. The good connections keep happening. So why don't you I love this question because everyone interprets it differently, but I would like you, whatever this means to you, it can be as far back in history as you want, or it can be the last 2 weeks. Tell everyone your story.
My story. So I grew up just outside of Boston in a town called Framingham, Massachusetts. Used to be known as the largest town in the country. No longer. It's also a city now. But I actually was a self-taught musician. My sister played piano and took dance. And I specifically loved theater. I loved dancing. I loved creativity. I had a basement in our house that I would play records and cassette tapes of different musicals, and somehow I got a hold of a chunk of fabric, and I would somehow design like pulley systems. I'm just remembering a lot of this as I'm speaking right now. Ooh. Pulley systems with fabric so that like I'd pull one and it would pull like a string of them together and one would pull up, and it was sort of like my way of being creative, but I love doing it to music. And I've always remembered that I used to do this thing with fabric and pulleys, but I had never actually connected till now that like music was actually a big part of it, because I would find either a song that had a lot of mood or texture to it, and I was always intrigued by how that connection always worked together. And I would just dance around in my basement. And so eventually my mom was like, okay, we're going to sign you up for piano lessons. Cause I would just sit at the piano and start, playing my own stuff. And so she signed me up for piano, and I took about 3 months of that. And I would not practice. I just, for whatever reason, I would just sit down and, play my own music. And at that time, um, my mom was like, if you're not going to practice piano anymore, we're going to stop your lessons. So she stopped my piano, but I just kept writing and doing my own thing. And up until college, I started studying dance with the Boston Ballet, and I thought I was going to be a director choreographer. And when it came time for me to go to college, I was like, oh, I should go to school and study something in performing arts. Let me study specifically acting, because that's all I knew how to do at the time. And my mom was always saying like, you should go into music, you're gifted in music, you're gifted in music. And I was like, no, music's just a hobby, music's a hobby. So I ended up going to the Hart School of Music, and that's where I met Meg. And during my time there, in my junior year, my sophomore year, a professor came up to me and said, David, we think as faculty, we've been following you, that you've been coaching a lot of singers and orchestrating, and you're a composer. You should look into going into music. And I was like, I'm not sure. And eventually something clicked, and I was like, you know what? Music's always come really easy to me. Let me explore it. So I ended up creating my own major in music direction composition. And then I had a teacher that was not jiving with my skills. He didn't understand that I was self-taught, how my ear worked. And I'm not somebody who has perfect pitch or can transcribe really well, but I definitely play by, at the time I was playing a lot by just feel and instinct, and I knew a lot of songs. So it was easy for me to sort of look at sheet music and not really read it, but use my ear and kind of use the notes at the same time. And no one had ever taught me how to practice piano. And he basically said, you're a terrible pianist. You're never going to make it as a musician, and you should think about another career. And he would give me like these really basic piano stuff. And looking back, I just realized he never understood that I didn't know how to even look at the music. I just look at it and be like, okay, the music should just come to me and pour out, because that's how music always was to me. It was like I could see things and it would just happen. So that was how composition was for me. I just had no idea where it would come from. And so I wanted to not only not make music anymore, but I also knew that I didn't want to not make music. So I decided to apply to grad school. And I really wanted to go to Carnegie Mellon as an undergraduate, because they had an amazing musical theater program. And I got rejected for then. But in my senior year, I applied for instrumental conducting at Carnegie Mellon. And at the time, the program actually wasn't in existence anymore. So I got a rejection letter, and I wanted Carnegie Mellon also because it has a great theater program, and I wanted to cross-pollinate the two. So in March of my senior year, I got an email from a professor saying, I came across your resume. You should apply for choral conducting. And I had no knowledge of choral music. I was not really a vocalist. I sang in choir in high school, but that was about it. So to me, it was like choir, it felt sort of stuffy. My mom wisely said, David, they're coming after you. Like, you should look into the program and just go to the audition. So I said, fine, I'll apply. I had to conduct a 40-person choir, which I had never done before. I had to do a song in German, and I got the wrong sheet music. It was a disaster. But the professor loved how I worked with the singers and gave me a full one, not only conducting lesson, but a lesson on how to work with a chorus there. Um, and I think he just liked how I took his notes, and he could tell that I was, um, I don't know, either he after my session he said your musicality is very good, and I feel like this program is going to change you, and he was right. I was able to connect my dance knowledge with my music again, and slowly I was able to start to make music and understand everything. Just started to click through his methods of teaching, and um, both patience, but also keeping a very high bar of what good musicianship is. And I also didn't know at the time he was a huge, huge choral legend. His name was Robert Page. And anytime I've done something in that sort of world, I say his name and everybody perks up. It's like, oh my gosh, you got to work with him. And to me, it was just, you know, an older guy. But he was an amazing legend, an incredible teacher, musician, arranger, and somebody who just I cared about, and he cared about me a lot. And it was a very special mentorship that I got to have, and I'm very grateful for him, because I feel like all the gifts that I guess I was given on this earth, he was able to sort of rekindle and connect. And I love to do many things. I love to teach. I love to arrange. I love to compose. I love to lead. I love to inspire. I love to coach um, and create and collaborate. And and he showed me a great way to be able to incorporate those things throughout my life. And then I came to New York and started doing New York things, where you try to find work and projects and everybody you know, and the people that you know and who they know, and then who are the people that they know that you can then sort of network with and learn from, and until you find like what your path is.
Till you find your path. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now this brings up so much, but I think of the many favorite things that I'm getting from your story, one is the importance for you, and I would say for many people, of having a mentor, someone like a mentor in your life. That there's a path that we're all looking for, even if we don't know it. And we may take the wrong road here or there, or take the wrong advice, or give ourselves the wrong advice. But it's that person who can look at us and say, I understand you, and I see where your strengths are and the things that you can bring into that, and be better at even, and more of a total picture of this is where, for now at least, this is where you belong in the world, and I can help get you there. You feel like that Robert Page was somebody who did that for you?
Without question. Because I think what a mentor does, and I will say I had another teacher that I worked with before him that he was a really, he took a lot of the mentorship responsibilities in terms of like showing me how to do things that I had questions on, and really paving a pathway for me to understand what it means to be a musician in theater, and what are the steps to success. And he was wonderful. I think the difference, though, why to me Robert Page though was more of a mentor to me, was I think what a mentor does versus just a teacher is a mentorship. I'm actually trying to figure this out as we talk.
Yeah.
I can't quite tell if a mentorship is, you know, there's that line from King and I, I'm blanking on it, but basically it's saying like, by your pupils, it might even be the line, by your pupils you will be taught. You know, and I think all teachers are learning from their students, but maybe there's something different with a mentorship, where it's not just about learning, it's about traditions, and it's also about I don't know. I am actually trying to figure out what the separation is between mentorship and teacher. Maybe it's time. Like I spent a great deal of time with Robert Page. I really studied him. But I think a mentorship is more about also the mentee. Um, but there's an maybe an adoration for both people in that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas it with yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on mentorship? Like, what do you think the difference is between teacher and a mentor?
No, this is, yeah. I mean, it's a great question, one to untangle. I think that I look at, I guess it's coming off the top of my head, but I look at the mentor-mentee relationship in part based on, like you said, what each person is bringing, because you as a student have to be open enough to be willing to allow somebody else in to where they can understand you better and know a little more about you than just, well, here's the skill you have and here's a skill you don't have and here's what you need to learn and here's what they say that you don't really need to learn. It has to be this deeper connection, and that also there has to be a willingness from the mentor to be open to that, and to not just kind of stop at the lessons, to stop at the skill and say, well, again, this is what I teach. And if I see you need to learn some other thing, yeah, I'll teach you that too. But that's about as far as it's go. I'm not going to help put the puzzle of it together for you. I'm going to give you the pieces and then you go off and figure it out. Whereas I think a mentor helps put that puzzle together for you and makes it more comprehensive and holistic and all of that in the same way. And a lot of that, I think the second element is not just about the two people, but it's the match itself. So you can have two people very willing to be there,
Right.
but if their objectives are different or their style is different, something about them doesn't click the way you can have just an awesome therapist, but it's just not the right fit. They're not going to get you to where you want to be as a person. Or you can have an awesome friend or partner in any type of relationship, business or personal, but if in the end the fit isn't right, the aesthetic or the way that you connect to the world even, then it doesn't matter how awesome those people are, then the relationship won't work.
That's very true. I mean, the relationships are always key. But I think about like my junior year, I took calculus in high school, and I loved my teacher. I loved being in her class and learning from her, and we had an amazing relationship. I don't think she was a mentor to me, but she was a teacher that I could go to in that way. And I'm still trying to think like what is the difference? Because I think because we like and I felt like if I wasn't learning something, she would be like, okay, here's another way to think about it, or here are skills that you can apply to life, in that way. So I feel like and I feel like even when I teach, and there are a couple people I do sort of mentor, but I think even when I teach, I still incorporate a lot of the privacy that a mentorship has. But I feel like maybe with a mentorship, like somebody, like if they're having a question at any time, they can ask, or there's definitely something of uh, more territory that's getting covered also in a mentorship.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, in a way, how I see it in my head is filling the spaces in between. So you can have somebody, like you said, your calculus teacher, who didn't just say, here's how you do calculus, but was willing to put in a little extra time and even go beyond that to a certain degree. But then I think to become a mentor, you need to then figure out how it all connects within that person and how that person connects with the world. And then when you see that, you can say, oh, okay, now here's what you can do with this, and here's how here's how, like he said, this is going to change your life. That's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily something that a great teacher would say. They would, they would be there and be present and do everything a great teacher does. But to really be that intimate, to say, I understand you well enough to know that this, if you allow this in, it's going to change your life.
Well, it's interesting as you're saying that. Like for some reason, the analogy of thinking of Jack Black and is it Jack Black, Jack Black, in the Rock School, School of Rock,
Oh yeah.
right? Like he's not a teacher, but he definitely becomes a mentor to them, to these
Right.
kids. Um, so they each have their own things in that way, and he does teach them, music and things. But it's funny, he does become that mentor, but not a teacher.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's a good point. And I think where what he did in that role for the kids was what any good teacher, but especially mentor, does, is you meet the student at their where they're from. You don't just, because I taught piano and other things for years, and when I started, I was so young, and one of the mistakes I made was, well, here's my curriculum, learn it. And I mean, I'd find ways to help them learn it, but what I learned is every student has something different to offer. And if all you're offering them is the standard curriculum because that's what you think is most important, then you're going to miss some of the wondrous things that are within that student that could not only be brought out and made wonderful themselves, but could then even cross over and make them better at all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of what he did in that movie. He found what their strengths were, what their interests were, met them at their level and where their world was the strongest, and brought them out to connect with the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds to me, and I think the reason why I stuck on this, first, was that the other person that you mentioned, and I can't remember all of the details, seemed a lot less encouraging.
My piano teacher.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, my
yeah, I think
piano.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, my piano teacher was the one that was not encouraging, and then I had a wonderful teacher, um, who helped me while I was in school, who really did show me a lot of the ropes and really encouraged me to, um, you know, I definitely did things on my own. Like got assigned a project. Uh, I did a show called Spoon River Anthologies based on the
Hmm.
book,
Hmm.
and there was a professor at the school who was directing it, and he said, there's all this poetry and folk songs, and the head of the music the music director of the theater program said, David, why don't you take this? And this was my first project to do, and he thought I was just gonna like teach the music that was on the page. To me, that I didn't even know that that was the option. To me, it was okay. I've got this sort of like, not great things, and I know that when people are doing a show, they need sheet music. So I arranged everything. I came up with piano accompaniments. I came up with chorales. I came up with concepts, perspective on these things. It was truly my first time ever arranging anything. Um, there was this song that I like came up with this, it was just like, a 16 bar song, but I had progressed it. I had a long, uh, figured out like I wanted to repeat and then build to this a cappella section, where it was like, this anthemic, everybody in like beautiful, like belty, warm choral sounds,
Mm.
sing, I want like I think the lyric was I want freedom now, and I wanted that lyric and the melody to sort of soar together.
Mm.
Um, and it's funny. I remember going to, and that was all stuff that I did on my own. I didn't have a teacher overlooking me. I just went and did it. Um, but I think that was, just to go back to my first point, was that was an example of like, I just did my own thing, but the teacher was like, I'm handing this over. And he had a lot of trust in me that I
Mm.
would do it, but I don't think he knew that I was going to arrange. And years later, funny enough, I was working on a project in the city, and I was sitting next to somebody who went to my, to where I went to school at Hart, and he graduated, maybe 12 years after me. And he said, "Oh my gosh, you're David Dabbon." I said, "Yes." He goes, I read your name in college because we all had the sheet music to Spoon River, and you did all these arrangements." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I have no idea what,
Oh,
or what condition." He goes, "They were wonderful." And I was so touched because at the time I thought they were wonderful. Um,
wow.
yeah, I was truly very proud of that work because it was the first time that like I was like, anything goes. I can make anything happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's hard as you get older as a musician to remember that concept, that any you can literally do anything. That's where music comes from, is getting to bang, two random notes that might not even typically sound good, and figure out how to make them sound good.
Oh, I love that.
Like that's and what are some things, but as we start to work as professionals, time becomes an issue, and that factors in. And so I do, and I'm really glad we're talking about this, because I'm working on a project now where I'm trying to rekindle my mindset of where I was at that time. And it's true, anything was possible because I had no rules. I didn't know that there were even rules.
Did you feel like, and this kind of goes a little back to the story of the fabric and all of that, but have you always felt to a certain degree that you could make your own rules, or did you go through a period where you felt like you needed to know what the rules of the game and the world are?
Yeah, so like for example, one of my first big projects was dance arranging The Nutty Professor, which was for Marvin Hamlish. And I
Mm.
was working with a choreographer, Joanne Hunter, who was wonderful. Rupert Holmes wrote the script, and Jerry Lewis was directing.
Oh,
Um,
God.
and this was right before Marvin had passed.
Yep.
And I had no idea what dance arranging really was. I knew dance breaks. I loved dance breaks. I danced into them in so many shows. So I was a real fan of dance arrangements. And Joanna and I just started playing, and all I knew is that I have to use the composer's work. So I took every aspect of that. I took chords, I took just rhythm, I took melody, I inverted melody, I inverted chord progressions, I took intervals and played with those. Like I literally took every little bit that I could play with, and just to see what it was.
Mm.
Um, and doing other shows, people are like, have said, sometimes they said I've taken too many liberties, and other times they're saying don't take enough. Yeah, I haven't taken enough liberties. I'm working on a
Hmm.
project now where they're saying take more, which for
Ah.
me is delicious. Um, and I've also, I feel like now I'm in a time where I've actually come up with a method that works for me, where I don't have to worry about, oh, I need to worry about just like, even when I did Beetlejuice, there was there's a song called Creepy Old Guy, and the first dance break I did that we actually did in DC and was not working. But I had the melody of the song in there. It was very literal, and it just never took off.
Hmm.
Um, so they were like, "Can you come up with another one?" And I was like, "Let me just go for it." And they were like, "Just, make it really bold." And I did. I took Eddie's amazing music, and I just played around, and I unlocked something that like was just really fun, and um, took the song from where it was to figuring out how to, you know, just keep it going in a way that kind of told the story. And yeah, another fun reminder of like, sometimes you're supposed to do one thing, but then until you try something else, you know it clicks when you're doing the you always want to find that moment where something clicks. And it's true,
Yeah.
it didn't click before, because I was told I should be doing this, but it wasn't right. It wasn't also authentic to my skills and how I hear music. And now,
Mm,
like, if you go back and you listen, me looking at that music, I'm like, how did I come up with this? Now, I remember at the time I was like, oh, I can pull this from this part and this, and Eddie was like, go, like, play, just make it really awesome. And having that also, it was one of the first times I also got to really, besides him and Marvin, I have gotten to work with many composers in the
okay.
room for my dance arrangements. Most of my work has been people that had either passed or was found music from the radio. I did a show called The Sign of the Times that was all music of the 60s.
Okay.
So my collaborators were choreographer and music team.
Right.
Um, um, so it's fun to break rules and make up rules so that you can break those new rules.
I think there is, I think you're right in saying that you have to remind yourself that that's something that you can always do. It's interesting to me that you say that you have to do that as you get older. And I want to ask more about that, because my feeling is there are people who from the beginning feel like there are rules to follow and you have to hit the mark on those rules all the time. And there are other people who feel like anything goes. And then there's the spectrum and everything in between. And generally, those people are fairly consistent throughout their lives, as much as they want to see it as I've changed. Their changes are kind of like this. And to have that kind of progression of starting from a place maybe where you know when I'm saying this for a lot of people out there who are like this, because I used to be this way, but where you were taught that this is how you do it, and if you don't do it that way, then you're technically wrong. There are so many other ways to do everything, and the more you can open yourself up to that realm of possibility, the closer you get to really discovering exactly the uniqueness of what you do and who you are. So the difference between your first version of that song was it was probably completely right and also good, but it didn't have a spark that was needed or some other element that you said something clicks. And the reason that it clicked wasn't just because it clicked for others and that those people liked it, was because you found the you inside of that.
I completely think that's a great assessment of what I was feeling too. And like, and because rules come with judgment. And as artists, we're trying to get away from judgment. We can judge, like, you want to, judgment is also different than editing. And because
Hmm.
so yeah, I would say rules come with judgment, and that's why it's really hard sometimes to have rules when you're trying to create. um Having some rules is really good. Like, there's like, I'm gonna write a song in major, instead of minor,
Right.
or I'm gonna use this chord progression, or I want to find this melody. But when you're trying to um when the rules are more shoulds, that's when you get tripped up.
Mm. And so what do you mean by rules are different than editing?
So, like, think of, like, Jackson Pollock, right? Like, he would create his splattered paintings, and editing might be like, okay, I've done a lot of red. What do I need to balance it? I might need to put some yellow in,
Mm-hmm.
and finding that right shade of orangey yellow to balance it might be the editing. Or me coming up with a piece of music and having too many notes, and then, but like, my first pass at it had the general cadence or had the general flow of an arc. It had a beginning, it had a progression, it had a motion, it had push and pull, but maybe there were just too many notes. Or maybe I meant to hit one chord, but I hit another. So being able to listen to that And I think the editing comes from uh, trying to get the clearest information
Mm.
across
Mm-hmm.
is where editing comes through. Um,
Like
so
what?
one part,
Yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead.
no, one part is just throwing it against the wall or seeing what comes out, and then the next part is revising it so that
Mm-hmm.
the what's inside actually can be heard. Because a lot of times, it's like watching somebody on American Idol in the auditions that thinks they're a singer, and they might feel like they are internally, but people hear them and they're like, but you're not on pitch and you're not doing it. It's like,
Yeah.
but then the editing process is actually their learning process of technique and figuring out how to breathe properly and sing on vowels. And so it's not just about what's in the head, it's also there's multiple steps. um
Well, yeah, and that talks a lot about just that you need to know enough about technique, whatever that means, in order to get your message across in the way that's effective, and in a way that kind of takes that out of the equation for the listener, so they're not focusing on your technique or how amazing you are at something, because they're just so caught up in what you did that you make it seem like it was always meant to be that way. But I love this idea of, I almost think of it as expansion and contraction in the sense that the first thing you do is, if throw everything up there and see what is there, and then start to decide, well, maybe I should take this out and replace it with this, or don't replace it with anything, it doesn't belong, and edit it down to the point where it again has the clearest expression of what you're trying to achieve. And to me, the difference between the rules and judgment and editing is oh geez, let me see if I can remember what I was going to say. Yes, rules and judgment to me imply lack of choice. You can only do this, that's it. And editing to me implies choice. You are choosing to only do this, you are choosing to not do this, but you're not being told either externally or by some inner voice that you can't do it.
yeah, that makes sense because even preparing for today, you had sent me a list of things to think about in terms of questions that we might talk about. And one of the things, and I took down some notes, and one word that just came out was perspective. Because you had one of your questions was about how do you approach music and what do you look for in artists, and and perspective really kept coming up for me when I was making some notes. And I think that's when I love your concept of editing as choice, and choice is perspective, right? Like if you're going to wear a sweater or a t-shirt, your perspective on, I what the you're getting information about the weather is, but also how you're going to feel in that weather.
Wow, yeah, that's great. God, yeah, that you're connecting your process with how it's connecting to the world, like the feel that you want. Wow, that's great. um God, my head is swirling with so much right now. uh, which means I'm going to take a left turn, because that's what we're talking about here. We can throw up anything. Yeah. I keep staring at this because I love it, and that is, and we're gonna get back to music too. But you have a picture food blog called Good
Mm,
Crazy Bites.
yes, and actually, Catherine was one of, I think, the actual first person I ever told about it. I have a Instagram picture blog called Good Crazy Bites, and it was something I was doing when I was traveling a lot with various projects. I loved finding new restaurants in local places, and so it was a way for me to actually research things. So it wasn't about me posting as much as following other people. And very early on, I realized, oh, I'm quite good at the photography of it,
Yes.
and people were saying, oh, you can make a business out of it, and who knows. So I just started doing it, and I kept it truly to myself for a while
Mhm.
until I had told Kat. And the idea of it was that I wanted something that was just for me, not for anybody else.
Mm.
Um, and it was just private, and uh, you know, that was just something that had excited
Wow.
me, was getting to do all of that. And ultimately, I started sharing, and um, during the pandemic, I cooked a ton. So
Mm.
getting to post some of the stuff that I cooked and baked. Um, yeah. And so I love food. I
Yeah.
love dining with people and what that experience. And I think there's a lot of connection of music and food. I worked on, and there's, think about editing. You could try a dish and say, oh, it's great, but it's missing salt, or you have too many ingredients here. Maybe we need to remove something. There's always
Mm.
balance. There's timing. There is um, there's the ingredients, there's recipes, there's going, improving a dish. There is, um, it's sensory. It can be done privately. It can be done in a group. There's both the private time and the public time of food. There is the preparation. There is the execution. Um, there's the both, and it's hard when you're cooking and eating at the same time and tasting things. Like, by the time you're done, are you full on what you've been tasting?
Oh,
Can you
wow.
even eat what you want, because are you so sick of trying this? But you get much joy from watching everybody else experience it.
Wow. Yeah. There's a lot of parallels there with music.
I was on the board of a remarkable uh, chorus called Choral Chameleon, led by Vince Peterson. I was president last year, and he created a program years ago that he brought back during the pandemic, which was, um, they partnered up with both a chef and a textile um, stylist, who they alternated months, and the choir went into recording studio and recorded pieces. And one month you got a recipe that would follow the sheet music, would follow the music. And so you would cook the dish and then listen to the music, and somehow the recipe, Lish's amazing work, paired up with the dish that you were eating. And we would have discussions about the music and the experience of it. Um, it was remarkable. And then with Abby, we were following these weavers making a textile blanket in Colombia. And at the end, you received the blanket, but you would hear the process of talking about texture and pattern and color.
Mm.
Um, and the music paired up with that. And there was always a video, and it was a great way for the both the ensemble and chorus, because they're two different groups
Okay.
within Choral Chameleon, for them to still make music during the year and still do it in a safe way, but yet
Huh.
still be creative. And Vince had based all of that on another program he had done years ago called Taste, where it was working with a chef, and each piece of music was designed to match a dish, and you would get your moose bouche, and at a specific part of the music you would eat and experience the combination of music and food.
That's incredible. That's wow. I mean, you think all the time about, you know, dinner music or music for various parties, or we're, putting our wedding music list together, things like that. But to be that married to the food, that's like pairing a wine with your meal, it's much closer.
There was one there was one instance where it was, I think, our second dish, where it was like it was a chicken dish with like tomatoes. It was delicious spin on, like, I think it was like a Chickencacciatore sort of thing, where it was like tomatoes and olives.
Mm.
No, sorry, chicken puttanesca and olives, and she created a polenta, And I remember at the end of her video, she said, make sure that you have really crusty bread to dip in the sauce.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was like watching my weight. I was, trying to eat healthy because we were obviously all at home and all we could do was eat.
Yeah.
I was like, I really don't need the bread. But then something in my gut was like, she insisted, said, get the bread. So I did it, and we're all on Zoom, and I eat my meal. And as the song's finishing, she was not joking. I took the bread and dipped it in the sauce. And like the way the chords and the singers sounded together with the sauce and the bread, I was so grateful for those calories.
Wow.
It was unreal, and the timing of eating the dish along with the timing of the music also worked out.
Oh my
um
God.
it was that was one of the most amazing experiences. Was All of them were exceptional, but that timing, and I was also, my partner Andy wasn't home, so it was just me, and it felt like a very private experience that I got to. I'd cooked it all, I got to listen, I got to,
Wow.
you know physicalize the dish. um yeah, it
Oh
was
my.
something I really loved.
I have not ever heard of this. And that's, I mean, there are a lot of things I haven't heard of, but usually in a conversation or an interview, like, oh yeah, this is something just so completely new, but now I'm going to need to experience that in
Yeah,
some way.
come check us out, Coral Chameleon.
Cora, yeah, I'm gonna write this down, and yeah, and anybody out there listening, couple things. First of all, Coral Chameleon, but I've seen Good Crazy Bites, and the pictures are incredible. And
Well, thanks, Nick.
if for some reason I decide to end this interview in the next 3 minutes, it's because I'm really hungry right
You and me both.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, Now going back to music, because I like to write notes that I can't read myself, apparently, but we get there. I thought it was you. Would you say that because I know you started this way, that through your life as a musician, that you are largely still self-taught?
If I would consider myself still self-taught.
Yeah, yeah,
I would say so because I think that that's where my foundation was rooted.
yeah.
Though I do have a lot of training,
Hmm.
and I like there's still things that a lot of musicians talk about, or other other artists, where I'm like, I still have no idea what that is. um so in that instance, I always feel like I'm self-taught, but I also know that I had an incredible opportunity to work with one of the most renowned choral people ever,
Hmm.
and getting to work with Dr. Page, and for 2 years, um, and our relationship past my time at Carnegie Mellon too. So I don't know. I am in a bizarre place because I take a lot of pride in being self-taught, but I also take a lot of pride in the training I got.
Right. You kind of I think what you're saying is you operate on a fundamental level as a self-taught person, but you added to that all this training that gave you even more.
Yeah, I would say that's a good assessment. Yeah, I feel, and it's hard because they are different parts of the brain. Like they're one is more analytical and one is more creative, and trying to figure out when to use both. It's like editing, as we were talking about, editing and creating. You have to know when you're doing what, and when and why and how, and what you need to make it successful. And that's where I think training is so outstanding, is not just for the problem solving, but for progress. It does help figure out how to sometimes connect the dots when you're lost, and sometimes it works, without it. Um, but I think the every individual is different, and for me, knowing how to utilize the skills that I've been given at different times in my life,
Mhm.
uh, has been very beneficial, I think.
I think you're right that everyone's different too, because there are people who have had wild success, and not just world success, but artistic success, never knowing how to read a note or think, or in quite a few different kinds of music too. We usually equate that with rock and roll or pop or something, but there have been plenty of other kinds of music where people have excelled just having that instinct and ear. And I was always brought up with ear training, as would say, or just being able to to play what you feel was as important as knowing what you're playing. So I kind of had that dual upbringing where know your theory and be able to say, well, this is what I'm doing, but then don't let that stop you from going to a place that you need to go because you think because you think you're breaking some rule of theory, or because you're not even sure how you can describe what the theory of that is. So what? The end result, the music that you're creating, the experience that you're creating for people is more important than trying to justify it based on some theoretical knowledge you have or don't have.
That makes me think of Andy, my partner, who's an outstanding musician, bought me one year The Inner Game of Music. Do you know that book?
No.
It's was inspired by a book called The Inner Game of Tennis. Okay. And The Inner Game of Tennis, talked about, for any tennis folks out there, talked about how do you serve in tennis. Like you basically throw up the ball and you hit. And yes, you can work on technique in tennis of it, but how do you, ultimately you're just throwing it and swinging. And when you're in the right headspace, it happens. But when you try to make it happen, it doesn't work. And so that's where tennis also is thrilling, because you're like, oh my gosh, I did it, right? And you got to keep going because you want to play the game. But so it's talking about that in the zone moment. And so the inner game of music's the music version of that. And there was an analogy early on in the book of it's similar to going skiing, right? There's the two people that go skiing. One that's like, okay, what do I do? How do I do it? What do I put my weight back? Do I put my weight forward? Am I wearing enough coats? Do I put the goggles on before I ski? Do I do it while I'm skiing? Do I keep my poles up? Do I put one foot in front of the other? And then there's the other person that's like, okay, I'm just going to go here, goggles on and go. And most of the time, the person that just goes, just gets down the mountain fine. And obviously I'm sure there's also the person that's like, I got it, and then falls and hits a tree, but the concept of what does it mean to just let the natural flow come out? And sometimes it's really hard to keep that vessel open so that things can naturally fall into place, because that's a lot of work. And there's a lot of preparation to go into keeping that channel open. There's the preparation of even putting on the skis and going up the mountain and mentally being ready for whatever's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think it does apply to so many things that there's I would say that where technique comes in when you're talking about something like skiing or performing and composing is can you replicate that? So you let your instinct go. It teaches you something while it's happening, but then do you know what you learned? Do you know where you were? Do you know where your headspace was and the actual physicality of what you did, or the mentality of what you did, so that when you need to do it again, can you do it again and do it well? And I've heard say that the people who are the best at what they do, it's not because there aren't other people out there who can, I'm going to hit this, 3-point, once and do an amazing job, but it's because those people can just do it over and over and over. And if they fall and maybe don't do it once, they know how to correct that and they do it again. And the other thing that what you were saying made me think of is that the person who's able to start by just throwing it away, or even if you're within a process and you're working on something and you're like, this isn't clicking, I need to go in a different direction. It's the idea of giving yourself permission to go there. And there's a podcast I did last year that talked about how as a developing artist and as someone who wants to, write more and write better or get to a different place, there is an idea that's happened over and over in history where another artist will do something that you maybe have never heard before, and your brain says, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Wow. And I sort of thought of that a year ago and dismissed it because I was like, no, that's not going to work. And then someone else did it well, and you're like, oh my God. And it gives you permission to go in that direction. And I think the stronger an artist is, the more they're able to give themselves that permission as often as possible.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Because you want to give yourself that, as you said, permission.
Yeah. And I think we, like, going back to the idea of rules and judgment, is we find all these reasons not to give ourselves permission. And the hope is that the more you do and the older you get and the more experience you have, the more permission there is, to the point where now your permission is just how you are. So you were talking about, I think earlier, about how there's a certain way that you approached music, or it might have been for the Beetlejuice thing, and that when you made that shift, that you couldn't completely remember how you got there, but that now there are certain ways you approach it where you kind of maybe took information in that and say, oh, okay, well, I can do it this way again, or go in that direction again, and it might lead to where I need to go. It might not, but at least I can go there.
Yeah. And that's where analysis comes from after doing,
Ooh, yeah. Analysis in like being able to break it down and say, what do you do? Yeah. No, that's great.
And sometimes the analysis is actually not even that important, and so that's where I'm in the place of like, now I don't want to analyze. When do I want to analyze? Because sometimes when I'm analyzing, it interrupts creativity.
Oh, yeah. Very true. Very true.
Speaking of creativity, I loved listening to Final Call that you just released that video of.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thanks.
I loved it musically, and video was awesome. And
thanks. Yeah, we're hoping to do more videos, but yeah, it's I think that as much as I love performing, it's really writing and recording where I am the most at home, And I thought, while you were talking earlier about the idea of giving, of not following rules, that a lot of what I do in the studio has to do with, let me just try something and see if it works. And if I'm a Jackson, if I'm throwing up everything on the canvas, then listen to it and decide, well, what is actually working and what's needed and what isn't. And I used to do band type recording where I would say, well, there's 4 pieces in this band, so all 4 pieces have to play all the time. And if it was recording and I was doing 16 tracks, I'd be like, well, how am I going to do that? And then I realized, well, shit, I came up with this great keyboard part, and in the end, I only really need about 6 seconds of it, because it was just extraneous throughout the rest of the composition, And so I think that's, and what I get fascinated with when I talk to someone who has maybe similar experiences within a different realm of music is how those things connect. So so like what you're doing is, arrangement and direction and all of that. It sounds like there's a lot of connection there in, when you're creating something, you want to, I don't know, I'm hearing a lot of connection.
Yeah. And it's even your point of what you just said. I think you said it was 2 minutes for 6 seconds.
Yeah.
Of that thing. It's like, I was working on something recently where I was needing to arrange a very famous song, and that has no words, and I'm like, how am I supposed to arrange this thing that is so specific already and I only needed a little bit of it. I was like, I can't, everybody told me, actually, was actually the hardest part, because everybody was like, you can't do it. Like, it's too famous. Everybody knows it. You're not going to be able to come up with anything else. And I was like, you're right, I can't. But in my head, early when I was told about this, I was like, yeah, I can come up with something really awesome.
Mhm.
And I was talking to a collaborator on it, and he said to me, he was like, don't worry about the 5 seconds you need. Do the whole thing, and then you'll find the whole. And I was like, of course. But I was like, but do I need to really waste my time? And he's like, you're not wasting. You're creating. Like, that's part of your process. It's like, I know that. I mean, I look at my Logic folder and how many minutes I have to create like a 3-minute song. I have like hours of music. Why is it with this one? I'm like, I can't. Is it because it's something that's already done that I'm needing to go in? But he was right. I needed to do a bigger portion of it in order to then create something. And it's true, because then the part at the end actually would triggered what I wanted to do at the beginning. And I
Oh,
was
that's
like,
great.
aha.
Yep. Yep. That's yeah. That's how that happens so often. Have you ever had it where you have created, like you're saying, and then there was a part of it you didn't use that you ended up revisiting and using for something else?
Mm, not yet, but I definitely have things that I've saved that I want to do that with.
Okay, yeah.
Then I'm like, I know I will. Um, yeah, but at the same time, I love creating, and so many times when I do something in the moment, I get a different idea. So I, I haven't gotten to reuse any of those other things, but I try to catalog it all in case, and I
Mm.
also don't remember most of it. So, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
We
but
tend to remember what
maybe one
works.
day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Life is very busy. Well, this has been amazing. I love talking about all this stuff with you, and it sounds like there's just way more that we could talk about and get even deeper with the music process and all of that. Thank you for spending this hour with me.
Thank you for hosting and having this and getting to talk about music and teachers and mentors and process, and um, yeah, it's always, it's great to also talk because it gets my brain going. So
Yes, absolutely. I know what you mean. And yeah, it was that you brought up so much about the process and about teaching and the development of that is something that we don't always get to. So that was really valuable. And I appreciate that too.
thank you, Nick.
And thank you, everybody, for being with us here, as always, for watching and listening and clicking and sharing. And please, all of the links that I have underneath for David's work, uh, go check them out. Go check out Good Crazy Bites. Check out that episode of John Oliver. He's one of my favorite dudes, and when I saw that, I just absolutely blew me away. And in general, I hope you've appreciated the time that we spent here with David. And until next interview edition, I will talk to you soon.